We continue our rolling coverage on the latest developments on the story. We've got three of our reporters who are on the ground. Karinda Jagmohan, and she's at Senzo Meyiwa's home in Umlazi in KwaZulu-Natal. Linda Mnisi is in Pretoria. He just covered that briefing that came a short while ago by the Minister and the National Commissioner. And Minenhle Hlela is in Soweto. Let's start with you, Minenhle. A little bit earlier on, you managed to speak to some of the Orlando Pirates supporters who expressed their jubilation and I guess a sense of relief. I think that's the word that you used a bit earlier on these news. What other developments on that side? What seems to be the general sentiment regarding this?
Well, obviously, like you said, Tammy, relief that after 6 years, there were so many promises from the sports minister back then. Tammy, if you remember, Fikile Mbalula promised that this case will be solved as swiftly as possible. That didn't materialize. Natim Teta sang the same song. This time around, Bheki Cele, when he took over the position, when quizzed about it, he was confident that this case would be solved as fast as possible. It's taken a few months, but now it seems like it's going to happen this time around. That I think the most thing that these fans were happy about, that there's people that have been arrested. There's 5 suspects, and the Ministry of Police have said that, they have a strong case. And, this is the first time they really feel and are very confident that this case might be actually solved. But then there's also other questions where we heard that 3 of these suspects are not involved, were not in the house at the time of this crime that was committed. Now it begs the question, are they saying the other 2 were involved or were they not involved? I think these fans wanted to know if those 2 people were actually involved or were at the house at the time that Senzo was actually killed. And, there's obviously questions of why was Senzo killed? What were it for? We know the suspects, 5 suspects that are there, it's a combination from Gauteng and KZN. So, as much as we got answers today, now it opens up a can of worms of more questions. Was this a hit? Was just this a robbery gone wrong? So there are questions answered, but now there are other questions of what actually happened and what was, the driving force that pushed these people to actually murder the former Orlando Pirates and Bafana Bafana goalkeeper.
Oh, thank you so much. Very pertinent questions that you're asking there, Minenhle. And this then leads to my question to you, Linda. And this is something that you touched on, at least some of the journalists touched on when they were asking the minister questions. Why the ring of secrecy around the availability of information? Does this not end up being more detrimental? Because now, where does one separate fact from fiction? What is real? What is not real? If you could just talk to us around that and the availability of information regarding this case.
Well, you'll remember that the minister has really kept, his cards on his chest at this point. Speaking about this particular case has always, triggered controversy. They've made numerous statements where they've promised imminent arrests over the years, and those did not happen. So I guess this is perhaps was in another attempt to try and make sure that they have, evidence that would back them. It's interesting that he uses the word that we have a solid case this time. It's interesting that though the choice of words that was used, given the fact that the history has proven that they've made promises prior. Even his predecessor, Fikile Mbalula, has made, promises around the imminent arrests. At some point we heard about arrests before Christmas, and at this particular point it was, of course, about the integrity and the credibility of these arrests, the credibility of these investigations, whether the Meyiwa family would ever find justice in their son's murder, given the fact that there's a lot that has been said, there's a lot that they have said, promised the Meyiwa family, promised South Africans at large, but also what is South Africans have taken, at least according to some that I spoke to this morning, was the kind of message, Tammy, that this sends to the broader public about their ability to tackle crime. And crime of this nature, with aggravated circumstances at this particular point. How they deal with it became then of paramount importance, because one gentleman that I spoke to earlier on said that, well, if they can't resolve Senzo Meyiwa's case, someone who was very well known, then how are they going to handle cases around people that are unknown, people that are not known by anybody?
What was quite clear, and this is something that the minister said as well, is the fact that they really had to keep a very close, tight lid on these investigations and what it is that they found out, because sometimes leaked information would actually jeopardize the case. Now, we do know that in 2018, the Senzo Meyiwa murder case was considered a cold case. And, you know, when you look at the justice system and you look at the different ministers of police that have been involved in this over the years, it looks like a bit of a relay race. First, it started with the Hawks. With the SAPS. From the SAPS, it went to the Hawks, and then back to the SAPS, and then to the cold case unit. If you could, Linda, perhaps just put this cold case unit into perspective for us and what the minister said regarding this.
Well, you might have heard the minister saying that this case was in particular, assigned to the cold case unit, where they did somewhat of a diagnosis and analyze the case according to, their expertise. And he says it's thanks to that process where they were able to establish quite a number of things that were not going right according to the case, and which perhaps led to the discovery of the firearm which was used in killing Senzo Meyiwa. He says at this particular point there's a lot of information, but information does not lead to court. So what would then crack it in a court of law would be evidence, and that's how that's why they're so confident about the prospects of getting justice this time.
And as we round off, Linda, just a verification, I guess, or confirmation of when these suspects will actually be making their way through to the courts.
It's quite interesting, Tammy, because then tomorrow we'll get to see exactly whether, some of the people who were in the house were arrested. So they're appearing at the Boksburg Magistrates Court tomorrow, and we'll get to hear exactly the issue around the charges that they are facing. The general there not being able to, tell us about the charges that they'll be facing, but I guess we'll then have to hear it in court tomorrow when they make their first court appearance. But he's indicated that, some of them were already in custody when these arrests were made, and others were not in custody.
Thank you so much, Linda Mnisi there out in Pretoria. Also, Minentle, who is in Soweto, has been spending some time there with the fans and getting their reaction. But let's go back to our reporter in Umlazi, in KZN, Karinda Jagmohan, who very recently just spoke to the family of Senzo Meyiwa, spoke to the brother of Senzo Meyiwa. Now, Karinda, there is going to be a briefing that AfriForum will be giving a bit later on today, and Siyabonga Meyiwa is supposedly going to be part of that. Has the family given you any sort of indication and direction as to what ought to be expected from that briefing?
At this point, the family has welcomed the arrests just announced by the police minister. They say they're now happy with the investigation so far. The suspects arrested this morning and expected to appear at the Boksburg court. And the family really at this point say that they welcome these arrests. It's unclear whether or not they have any messages with regards to AfriForum going forward, or whether they'll be able to share that at this point. But at this stage, really, for them, it's relief that they've been waiting for 6 years. Of course, today was a very important moment for the family, the anniversary of Senzo Meyiwa's death. For them, of course, this was a day where they were supposed to come together to share their pain. And of course, this announcement now giving them some relief. It's a step closer in the direction of justice for the family. So at this point, I can tell you now, the families are receiving calls from other community members as well as other media houses to ask for their comments on this arrest, and they say they indeed welcome the news. Going forward, though, of course, they do say that they want to ensure that court proceedings continue in the same manner, whereby they can find ultimately justice for the deaths of really a soccer superstar in South Africa. I can tell you now that family members are in the household, speaking to each other. They gathered here today to observe this day, really watched that police minister's briefing together, and coming out of the store as well, Senzo Meyiwa's mother tearing up, especially as she hears about the arrest of suspects. So for them, really at this stage, it's a sign of relief. The community itself is quite quiet today. There is a small police presence just outside the family home, anticipating any supporters to come through just to convey their condolences to the family. At this stage, we're not seeing any supporters outside the Meyiwa family home, but we do expect later tonight to see a bigger crowd, as the police minister is expected to visit the family to personally again give him the news that he's just given the country.